Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Earlier in March, we saw neighborhoods in Las Vegas calling for town hall meetings with the police to address what's being called a spike in local crime. And if you follow the crime beat in our local media, it is no surprise that people think crime here is on the rise. But is it? Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with UNLV Crime and Criminal Justice Policy Fellow Dr. Josh Donnelly. Together, we'll look at the numbers, the perception, and the reality. Is Las Vegas safe? It's Wednesday, March 12th. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. So, Dr. Donnelly, what do the stats tell us about violent crime in our community here?
Yeah, so if we look at violent crime, statistically, we're often going to see a decline today, not only in our own jurisdiction, but across the United States. There's this growing trend that violent crime is on the decline, contrary to popular belief that is presented in the media today, specifically during political election cycles.
So let me ask the ultimate question right off the bat. Why do so many Las Vegans say that they feel less safe?
I think that Las Vegans feel that crime is on the rise specifically due to the recent political rhetoric that crime is on the increase. We often see this associated with political campaigns. And in American politics, one of the leading generators to get voters typically on your side is the get tough on crime stance, and to highlight the specific criminal incidents that are occurring in a jurisdiction that takes the mainstream media by storm. It doesn't necessarily mean that violent robberies or violent carjackings are going up, but they often use the example of a violent offense to kind of spew this narrative that crime, specifically violent crime, is on the rise, and that they are the candidate that can, in fact, deal with this rise in violent crime. So we see statistically crime is typically on the decline, but our statistical reality doesn't always match people's perceptions of fear of crime.
Yeah. And, even in our most recent mayoral race, we had both candidates on CityCast Las Vegas, and they both said that public safety, i.e. crime and crime prevention, was their top issue. Las Vegas is an ever-growing, ever-attractive, major metropolitan area, and this conversation isn't going away. So compared to other big cities, if you had to give Las Vegas a safety grade, A to F, I guess, pretty basic, what would it be and why?
So for me, I think that the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department does an excellent job at policing the problems in this city. This is, like I said, it's such a unique town. It's such a transient population. And people kind of fail to realize that. LVMPD has a job not only to secure the locals in this area, but also to secure the Las Vegas Strip, which is, like I said, a Mecca tourism capital of the world. And so Vegas is unique in the sense of the area within its jurisdiction, but also Las Vegas has a good amount of resources. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has a good amount of resources to establish specialized units, to engage in data-driven policing. And LVMPD has worked closely with UNLV on a number of crime prevention initiatives, of data-driven approaches. So what makes Metro good at what it does is it values the community. It's proactive in solving the community's issues and trying to understand it. It's one of the sheriff's top initiatives. But also they reach out to those of us who engage in the science behind it for help. Historically, academics, if I would have walked into a policing agency and I would have told a captain or a chief, hey, I can help you drive crime down. I can help you prevent crime.
Yeah.
They would have told me to get lost, right?
Yeah.
I'm a civilian. What do I know about policing? Instead, Metro's an agency who says, we have this persistent problem that's occurring. We don't understand it fully. Let me connect with the right people. Let's engage in research. Let's engage in a data-driven approach to solving that problem. And so that's why I think Metro is one of the agency that stands out in terms of proper policing or community-oriented policing.
Well, I'm not going to challenge you on that. I know that there have been a lot of internal reforms within LVMPD. Of course, that agency is not without its criticism as well, some of which has been the subject of federal litigation in the past. But that's beyond the scope of our conversation today, because certainly any big agency is going to have its flaws, and LVMPD is not without theirs. But if you were to give it a letter grade here in Las Vegas compared to other places that you're aware of, how do we do?
A letter grade. I'm in the business of assigning letter grades.
You are, yeah.
This one's a little bit more complex than my traditional grading scheme. I would say, I'll be honest, I would say in the range of A. And this is with the caveat. So I've been a professor now for 3 years, post-PhD, and LVMPD is one of the major agencies I've worked with. I've looked at quite a few other agencies, but in terms of the work that I've done with LVMPD, and when I'm sitting down at the table and I'm listening to their captains and I'm listening to the initiatives that matter to the decision makers that are in Las Vegas, to me, that's what deserves the A rating. And that's not always what's portrayed in the media or what's going on the streets with your regular patrol and beat officers. But to see that level of care and dedication at the command staff level, it is our hope that it would trickle down to the frontline patrol officers, which I think in many of the area commands it does.
What kind of crimes are we seeing the most of in Las Vegas these days? Because we're hearing about these violent crimes and these home invasions and things, but is that the majority of the crimes that people are being arrested for in our city?
I don't believe so. Off the top of my head, I think the biggest offense category in Las Vegas is going to be your assault offenses, your assault and batteries. If you look at Las Vegas, it's such a recreational nightlife city. You look at the Las Vegas Strip, you look at the downtown area, and when you mix alcohol and drugs and decision making, right, sometimes you get a toxic brew for this type of crime. But typically we're going to see the assault offenses as well as larceny. Larceny will probably be another big one just due to the number of what we would call suitable targets that exist in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and theft comes in a lot of different ways. So larceny could be everything from shoplifting to pickpocketing to financial scams and people being taken advantage of in a lot of all the technological ways that are out there, right?
Yes. And so Las Vegas, I'm not too sure on the technical delineation from petty larceny to grand larceny, but it's typically going to be based on a dollar amount. And so these are the types of crimes that make up a majority of what's occurring in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot of identity theft that was coming up as well, which is, again, a financial crime. But I think ultimately, you're saying, and especially with this violent crime, we are statistically getting safer, but the locals insist that, the feeling is opposite. So how does that affect crime policy and law? In other words, if the public, like in these town hall meetings, are really yelling at their elected officials and the police because of what they're perceiving, how does that impact policy here?
I think in a number of ways. I think we've seen historically when the public is very concerned with crime and they believe crime is on the rise, sometimes that is translated into tough on crime policies, and that's translated into different types of laws and legal sanctions that overtly punish offenders because it's driven by this public outcry for fix this. My approach to communities would be more of an educational approach and not to get caught up in the political rhetoric of crime is on the rise or violent crime is on the rise. Actually, no, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the statistics. And okay, I get it if you don't want to look at the statistics that are provided by LVMPD. Look at neutral parties such as universities that are engaged in this neutral fact finding, this research that we do. Now, some some research and grants are funded by non-neutral agencies, but a lot of the work I do is
disclosure. That's
yes.
always important too. I get that. That's context.
Yes. So a lot of the data I look at is what is occurring in Las Vegas. What does that mean in terms of crime statistics? What is LVMP doing to address this? And so my approach is always to look at the data and see what is actually occurring in our jurisdiction. And then we do trend analyses. Was it better from 23 to 24, from 24 to 25? And
Is it better?
So crime from 2022 to 2023, overall, there was a decrease in our jurisdiction. From 23 to 24, I haven't looked at that full set of numbers from 24 yet, but I would imagine it was the same type of minimal level of decline. We saw, I think from person to person crimes, around a 5% decrease from 22 to 23, if I'm not mistaken, but we are seeing general decreases in these crimes.
Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other toppings, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
Over the past several days, 3 females have been found dead.
Looks like someone's going after these girls.
Then they have to know to watch their backs.
Streaming March 13th.
You really want what happened to this one that happened to you?
Exactly why I need to keep going on this.
Starring Emmy Award winner Amanda Seyfried.
I'm worried about what you're gonna find. So am I.
Long Bright River. A limited series. Streaming March 13th. Only on Peacock.
So what do you think is the key to that success? What do you think that entities like Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, maybe Henderson Police Department, Las Vegas Marshals, whoever else is responsible for law enforcement, is doing right now to achieve that goal of making Las Vegas, basically the Las Vegas Valley, the safest in America, as they proclaim that they want?
Yeah, so I can't really speak for our elected officials because I'm not too sure of what they're doing on their side to make this message well known to our population. I know that LVMPD is a very transparent agency. When I talk about pros and cons of policing agencies, one of the biggest ones that I hone in on is transparency. Because in order for a policing agency to be effective, what we say is they have to have police legitimacy. The community has to believe in their legitimate power to police that community. And we see that policing agencies that have high levels of police legitimacy are very transparent. That means that when we see an officer-involved shooting, Metro is very quick to get out and hold a press briefing as soon as they get the evidence and as soon as they put that story together and they're able to answer all these questions, they inform the public. A lot of agencies, they don't engage in this transparent policing. Now, the thing with looking at crime statistics is that the public is probably not very good with perceiving data. And so one of the things that I teach my students in my crime prevention and crime analyses class is that as academics, as professionals, we're able to look at all of this data and look at the nuanced patterns, to look at the trend analyses and say, there's a decline. If we put up those data to the public and we say, hey, look at this Excel sheet or look at this trend analysis, it's not translatable.
Josh, let's look at that Excel sheet now. Let's send that out to all the people listening in your mailbox. Yeah. Look for it. Here comes a spreadsheet. Yeah, that is rough.
And we'll see how well received it is. So it's all about what we call translational criminology. It's taking those findings, those nuanced patterns, and translating it so that a member of the public says, wow, violent crime or person-to-person crime is on the decline. Although maybe we saw an increase in disorder or low-level crimes, such as public drunkenness or graffiti. So there's also different types of crime.
Catalytic converter stealing,
Theft,
because that
right?
was a spike.
Yes.
Yeah, theft, copper theft, stuff like that.
And so when we have those trends, this is another important thing to understand is that crime, at least in the way that I profess to understand it and teach about it, is it's the result of opportunity. And so what a violent offender, such as a person who's willing to commit a robbery against someone, their thought process is very different from someone who commits a burglary or someone who commits a catalytic converter theft. So the opportunities to commit crime and the nuanced decisions behind why people engage in certain types of crime are different for each crime. So just because catalytic converter thefts are on the rise, or maybe there was an increase of a couple hundred of them in the jurisdiction, that doesn't necessarily mean that robberies are on the rise or that violent crime is on the rise. So it's important to understand crime and the different types of crime, which we typically categorize into 3 types: violent crime, disorder crime, and property crime.
In a matter of full disclosure, I spent a lot of my life as a criminal defense attorney and worked for one of the top public records firms in the jurisdiction. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is not always stellar when it comes to releasing documents and really showing their work for a lot of the things that they do. So I will push back on you a little bit, but I appreciate your perspective. Now, you mentioned transients and tourism, and obviously those are going to be big challenges to a place like Las Vegas. What other unique challenges does Las Vegas face when tackling safety and, as you've been discussing, the perception of safety in the community?
So if we look at the Las Vegas Valley, it's a very diverse valley, very diverse communities. And so in order to implement proper type of policing today, the correct type of policing today, agencies should engage in what we call community-oriented policing. And that's knowing your community, knowing what the community values, and responding to that community's issues in a proactive manner. And so I think a challenge of the LVMPD is to understand our diverse community. And I believe that they do a good job at trying to do this and trying to engage in this community-oriented and problem-oriented policing. And additionally, the Vegas Valley has multiple other policing agencies. So working with Henderson PD, working with North Las Vegas PD. So there's a lot of behind the scenes cooperation behind the agencies that I imagine has to happen that would take levels of executive coordination. And this can sometimes be problematic, as we've seen in the news. Henderson Police has had a relatively high rate of turnover of their leadership of police chiefs.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on this podcast as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so that can create issues for multi-agency collaboration, because typically when you have a new chief that comes in, they want to do things their way, and that may mess up partnerships or logistics in multi-agency collaboration. So those are some of the other issues that I think Metro would face in the agency in our jurisdiction. But I think, the main thing is securing the Las Vegas Strip and making sure that our locals and our tourists feel safe when they come here, because I am also a research fellow for the Tourism Safety Institute that was launched here at UNLV. And we've deployed a survey, which we'll release later, which looks at, how do people decide where they're going to vacation, right? And one of the leading considerations of people. Is it
safe? Is it a safe place to go? Right.
Yes. And sometimes in
which is why more people come here than North Korea, I would imagine.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And amongst other things. If you look at Las Vegas, along our tourist corridors, we have heavy populations of unhoused individuals now. And a lot of times people look at that and they correlate that with increased crime or low safety. And,
that's not necessarily true. Let's just get that out there.
Yeah. It's not true. And this is one of the things that I try to get across to my students, is that being unhoused is not a crime. It's an unfortunate social circumstance that led many of these people to become unhoused, such as drug addiction, financial issues, things like these, which are public health issues. And a lot of times the public puts it on the police to be able to solve these issues of of dealing with the unhoused, but that's not a police issue. That's a societal issue.
Well, that actually brings up a really good point, because one thing that all the elected officials have agreed upon, apparently, Clark County, City of Las Vegas, is that sleeping in public is indeed a crime, which can be enforced. So I'm hearing from you, not to sum up everything you just said, because it's a lot and it's pretty dense, but there seem to be solutions out there that can prevent crime that maybe aren't being advanced or talked about enough. And so I guess that's my question to you is, what sort of the solutions that you're talking about stand a chance to get the bipartisan support of elected officials? Because that seems to be a piece of the puzzle too.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so whenever we engage in crime prevention measures, we want to do it with a problem-oriented approach, which means we're not slapping a Band-Aid on the issue. And historically, what we've seen in policing is that when you have a hot spot of crime, police respond to that area, they arrest offenders, and they leave. And that hot spot goes down for a month, 2 months, 3 months. The offenders get back out, and then they go back to those same environments, and the hot spot glows again. And so when we move into an area to kind of discover why crimes are occurring, we have to look at the environment, but we have to look at the most prolific offenders that exist in that environment. And that's a data-driven and surveillance approach that often takes months. So when police respond to an area, a lot of time the public wants them to arrest right away. But sometimes the best approach is not to arrest right away and discover the most problematic places that exist in a jurisdiction, and then move in with a community-oriented model to say, hey, I know that crimes aren't necessarily happening at this 7-Eleven corner, but at that 7-Eleven corner, there's an open-air drug market where people are dealing drugs in the parking lot, or offenders are going back to that area and meeting and staging and transferring drugs, or engaged in pimping or human sex trafficking. It's not only understanding the people who are involved in crime, but the places that are involved in crime, and then bringing an entire city team at the table to say, we're going to reach out to parking enforcement to change the parking hours so that we can detect who belongs in an area or during certain times. So for example, if parking hours are from 6 to 11 in this street, or only certain cars can park in this lot, and you have people who are coming to that place who don't belong in that lot, they don't have a permit, it starts to highlight the people who exist in an area pro-socially and who are there for non-pro-social reasons.
But Josh, this sounds complicated, hard,
Yes.
maybe expensive. We also have to always take into consideration civil rights of individuals.
Yes.
Is what you're suggesting something that you think is being talked about in Las Vegas and that could receive bipartisan support where necessary?
I believe so. I don't think the argument here is to restrict civil liberties. I don't think the argument here is to engage in what many people would call zero tolerance policing. The argument here is to better understand where crime is occurring and why it's occurring in those locations, because we see statistically that crime concentrates no matter the jurisdiction you look at. A small number of offenders account for a disproportionate number of crime, and a small number of places account for a disproportionate number of crimes occurring at a location. We call that the law of crime concentration. I don't want it to translate as restricting people's rights and zero tolerance policing. I want it to translate into what is it about environments that's allowing crime to exist here, and how can we get everyone who has a vested interest in that community to sit down at the table and say, I'm going to do my part in preventing crime. Because police are not the only tool in the crime prevention tool belt that should be used to prevent crime. It should be a societal approach. It should be an entire city board approach. Anyone who expects the police to solve and prevent crime completely all on their own is misinformed about why crime happens and how it's happening. So we need multiple community agencies who have vested interests in those communities to move in and do their part as well.
So if residents here want to see an accurate picture of the amount of crime in their area so they can make these sort of informed contributions, where should they look?
So LVMPD has an open data portal, so they can go to Google, they can type in LVMPD data, and they can look at the actual calls for service and the crime maps that Metro is responding to on a weekly basis. They can look in the last 24 hours in the last year. We call that crime mapping. It's GIS. And so Metro, contrary to what was said earlier, how sometimes they have trouble or they've had past legal issues in releasing documents, they are very transparent with their data in terms of what they're responding to.
I'll double down on that. There's some drop-down menus that actually make it pretty intuitive to get through. You don't have to have a criminal justice background to be able to navigate those data maps. And so we're definitely going to link that in our show notes. And with that, I want to thank you, Dr. Josh Donnelly, for coming on and sharing information on this very, very important topic with us at CityCast Las Vegas.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend. You can also rate our show, leave us a review. We love reading them, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.